Everybody. Welcome to this week's Pax Americana. I am Julie Roginski here with Olga Lautman. Olga, so much to discuss, so little time today. Let's start with the fact that there was yet another article in the New York Times, which nobody in the world bothered to pick up on, which is that the United States failed to investigate whether there is a real counterintelligence operation that should have taken place about the fact that Donald Trump may or may not have been a Russian asset. Now, we have heard for years about the Russia hoax, so on and so forth. And yet, it seems that neither the first Trump administration, when you actually had somewhat of a sense of adult in the room somewhere along the way, or even more troubling, the Biden administration bothered to look into this. And just to give people perspective on what's been going on, insanely, there was a counterintelligence operation that began by the FBI, acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. People might see him on CNN now all the time. Was launched this investigation after the firing of Jim Comey, because Donald Trump kept telling Comey to drop the Russia investigation. Comey wouldn't, which is interesting because Comey has a lot to answer for in that also, but that's for a separate show. And ultimately, he decided that he was going to fire Comey. And then within a week, McCabe launches this investigation, tells Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, because remember, Sessions had recused himself at that point from anything to do with the Russia investigation, tells Rod Rosenstein that he's going to open this, that he has opened this investigation. And the very next day, Rod Rosenstein appoints Robert Mueller, as the special counsel to investigate whether there were any criminal activities happening between the Trump campaign / Donald Trump and Russia, which really very much narrowed the scope of what Mueller was able to do. Mueller was not allowed to have any kind of counterintelligence mandate to investigate. And interestingly, the FBI was not told about this. So McCabe thought that, in fact, Mueller was investigating the counterintelligence aspect of this. Rosenstein made sure that he wasn't, which leads us to ask why and how is it that the United States does not yet have a sense of whether Donald Trump was a Russian or continues to be a Russian asset to this day. This is not crazy Democratic conspiracy talk. This is not crazy Russia hoax stuff, as Donald Trump wants us to believe. This is, in fact, something that the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, all of whom are very conservative, had serious questions about. And rightly so, because if you ever read Olga's and my 20-part series on how Russia infiltrated the Trump campaign, you would understand that there are, I don't know, Olga, 20, 30, 50, 100 red flags going all the way back to the 80s that were raised.
Oh my God, 140 contacts. I documented every single contact that Trump ever had. In 2015, by the way, when I saw Russia attacking the U.S. election, because I was keeping an eye at the time on Russia's operations on Donbass and Crimea, and I saw the chatter shifting towards U.S. And I was like, what in the heck is going on? And 120 contacts Trump has had between him and starting with the Soviets in the early 80s and then moving on through the election. You and I documented everything in the election from 2015 on, every single way Russia tried to get into the campaign, every meeting they had with a Trump campaign official, the travels from, Trump campaign people to Russia, the use of, their military intelligence hackers, the GRU unit, to hack into not only the CCC, but also to probe our voting systems across the states. And there was a report. Russia didn't alter anything, but that they did manage to hack into all 50 states inside the voting systems. And that's it. And just to remind you with Comey, I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. There is a reason that the United States um, pretty much cut off most of its diplomatic contacts with Russia since 2014, put a lot of sanctions at the time on Russia. Obviously, Obama could have and should have done a million times more. But there's a reason for this. Trump, in what was it, February or March, after he came into office, the first thing he did was invite Lavrov and Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, to the Oval Office.
And foreign minister, people who
Yeah.
Lavrov was the foreign minister, right?
And invite them to the Oval Office, brag to them that he just fired the nut job Comey and that he will have the Russia investigation shut down now. This was right before the appointment of the special counsel. Allow only TASS, Russia's state media, in to the meeting. And TASS, since Soviet days, they even know a KGB former agent who operated in the United States under the cover of a TASS journalist. But TASS has historically been used as cover for KGB agents and now FSB, SVR agents. They were the only ones allowed into the Oval Office, not our press. So all the pictures that we have of Trump first time smiling and happy with Kislyak and Lavrov came from TASS journalists or agents. And then on top of it, he also handed very sensitive intelligence from Israel to the Russians, which pretty much disrupted a plot in the Middle East at the time. Disrupted something that Israel was doing in the Middle East at the time. So just for the background, I mean, this was the most shameful. Then we had Helsinki, but prior to Helsinki, this was the most shameful, infuriating thing. The Russians attacked our election. Everything that they did, we already by that point were beginning to have information trickling out of everything that they did. And the first instinct Trump had was to bring Lavrov to the Oval Office. I mean, it was gross. And that's it. And yes, America never got to see whether their president is a U.S. Is a Russian agent. Asset by U.S. terms in Russia, there's no such thing in their classification of asset. They have agents of influence, trusted contacts, and yada yada. So for them, you know, he would have been a trusted contact or an agent of influence from the 80s, which is pretty much when he was recruited. And just to finish up with this, after he won election, literally hours after, Moskovsky Komsomolets, which is used by Russia's security service, FSB, to get information out, hours after, the daughter of the former Soviet ambassador Yuri Dubinin, Natalia Dubinina, put out a article, basically, not article, interview, recalling how she introduced her dad to what is it called, to Trump when he arrived in the United States. And you and I went through this. I think we already, what is it, killed a horse to death or whatever that saying is, about it, and how, you know, unusual it would be for like from Queens to pick up her dad at the airport and then drive, you know, to the UN and then go to Trump Tower. Like, the thing obviously was very bizarre, but the point is she wanted Trump to know that she was sending a reminder of his days with the Soviets in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, look, what we're talking about here is a insane cover-up by Rod Rosenstein And the question needs to be asked of Rod Rosenstein, why?
Why?
He's never said it before. I want to just say this. Peter Navarro, who was Trump, a senior aide in the White House for Trump, he had an op-ed this week in the New York Post, and he argued that the newly declassified FBI documents about how this all began, which we just talked about, this Russia hoax, as they call it, or as we call it, this counterintelligence investigation that didn't go far. He claims that this new paperwork that they released publicly exposes unanswered questions about why the FBI escalated from investigating Trump associates to investigating Trump himself as a potential counterintelligence threat. And he demanded in this op-ed that Congress convene an investigation into this before the November election. Then Trump gets in on the action, and he retruthed, or whatever the hell you call his stupid social media thing, the op-ed without comment, right? Which is interesting. He usually has a comment, but this time he just retruthed it without comment. What he specifically and conspicuously did not address is the other revelation that's buried in there, which is why Rosenstein, after being told that the FBI was investigating whether he, Trump, posed a Russian counterintelligence threat, ensured that no one would ever get to the bottom of that question. So listen, if they want to haul him in front of a congressional committee, which is what they're saying they want to do, amen. Because I got some questions. Like, bring him in under oath. I think every network, Olga, should run this gavel to gavel. Blow out all the other programming.
Can we have a call in? All of us can call in.
I will travel to Washington, and I will literally sit and be behind some senators and former staffer and hand them the paper with the questions to ask.
I hold signs up.
Yeah, there's really only one question, which is why was this counterintelligence into Trump effectively strangled in the crib before it really got underway? Rosenstein, friends, is now a national security lawyer, at Baker McKenzie in Washington, if anybody wants to potentially call him and ask him this question. He's offered no public explanation for his behavior. So my thing is, Republicans, get your wish. Drag him up to the hill, because we all deserve to hear what he has to say. I too want to know how this investigation not just started. I understand how it got started. I want to know why it went nowhere 24 hours after it began. 24 hours.
And this is the only country where this could happen. Honestly, this is the only country. I never understood why. But across Europe, anyone who is suspected, whether it could be the, foreign minister, it could be like one of the highest officials, if they're suspected of corruption, or if they're suspected of, working with a foreign intelligence service or advancing the interest of another country, they are investigated and very publicly prosecuted. And here I just don't understand why nothing was ever done. I can promise you, like I said, spent 2015 and 16 in a rabbit hole on Trump and have a file, forget it. Insanely long. He wouldn't be able to clean the floors in the CIA with all the compromise that he had on him, with all the questionable contacts he had on him. He would not be able to clean the floors. If he applied for a job in the CIA or in the FBI or in the Pentagon, the most minuscule job, he would have never passed that in order to get into the building and get that job. How is it that he became president? We need to also look at, our system and what needs to be corrected, because how is it possible that someone who is so compromised, so corrupt, had so many, for God's sakes, he had literally, I remember digging into Indonesia, his business. You know who his business partners were? They hired ISIS to take out one of the leaders in Indonesia. How is it someone, forget even Russia, but the fact that he had, his business partners had contacts with terrorist organizations, with everything. And how is it that no one, someone like that can get into the most sensitive information that the United States has, because as president, he literally, and our system is so bizarre because he literally can take every single intelligence, the nuclear arsenal, anything, and hand it over to China or Russia or sell it to someone, and no one can do a thing because he's the president and he can say, I declassified it and therefore I can hand it over.
Yeah.
How do we have that kind of system where this is allowed, that one person, just because he came there without any vetting, because voters decided this is, what they want, that he can go get information like this? Anyone else, for one piece of paper, if they smuggle one piece of paper out that is classified, they will have Secret Service showing up to their house without any kind of, fanfare or anything, arrest them and prosecute them. And this man can do pretty much whatever you want, including at the time, hand Israeli intelligence. This wasn't even U.S. intelligence to Lavrov and Kislyak. And this, we need to really, really, since the system is being torn down, when we rebuild it, we need to put some kind of safeguards because it's absurd.
I will tell you this, and this nobody ever talks about, and I'm not sure why, but nobody really talked about. Listen, all the information that we're giving you right now, 95% of it was known in 2018. None of this is potentially new information. And yet, we not just didn't talk about it, we reelected the guy that was responsible for this. Here's something else that he's responsible for, I think. We don't have evidence of this. But towards the end of his first administration, a tremendous number of American spies died and disappeared abroad. Draw your own conclusions. Draw your own conclusions. And tell me that if this were anybody else, aside from the President of the United States, who had access to that kind of intelligence, and all of a sudden, a tremendous number of American assets died. You don't think that that would launch a humongous counterintelligence investigation? And not just in the former Soviet Union, but all over the world, in the Middle East and other places. Why? That's a question that nobody has bothered to answer, but it's a fact. And the part that I think kills me more than anything else, Olga, is truly, I think this is the biggest scandal in the history of the United States, potentially, that we do not know whether a man who was credibly believed, and not by the quote unquote deep state, which is a very convenient way to frame professional security.
If we had a deep state, he wouldn't be here.
But there are people who devoted their lives to counterintelligence, who believed with every fiber of their being, including Andrew McCabe, by the way, whose only sin in the eyes of Donald Trump is that his wife was running for office as a Democrat. Give me a break. Andrew McCabe is not some DNC stooge. The guy's a lifelong security guy. He believed strongly that there was a predicate to launch a counterintelligence investigation. And sit with this again for a minute, because truly just the enormity of what we're saying is so tremendous. He and many others in the leadership of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is staffed mostly by people who are conservative and are probably registered Republicans if they're registered at all. This is not like the Haight-Ashbury, convening here. These people believed that there was a predicate to try to determine whether the President of the United States had been or continued to be an asset of the Russian Federation. Friends, I don't care what you think about Watergate or the Teapot Dome or 1,000 other scandals that have happened in the 250-year history of this nation. Nothing in the world would be bigger than this. And yet we still don't know. And here I have to ask Merrick Garland, sir, what the fuck were you thinking? Truly.
And it's not only Trump, because New York Times in 2017 reported, for instance, that Kushner went to Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, and asked if he can use the Russian embassy as a back channel to avoid U.S. detection. so they can communicate without being harassed by Americans. Now, Julie, can you imagine if you or I walked into a Russian embassy and said, hey, we want to send information to you, but we don't want to be targeted by, those pesky FBI counterintelligence people or the CIA who is monitoring or whatnot. Can we use that? Do you know how quick we would be picked up?
Oh.
I mean, they would investigate and immediately pick us up. And the reason that the FBI allegedly, the New York Times allegedly knew this is because Kislyak called Moscow and said this was the offer that he received on top of, and that is all allowed for collection because he is a target. Anyone who comes in contact with a target of U.S. intelligence services, they get rolled up automatically into it. Now, can you imagine that this happened? And Flynn at the time, at the same meeting, asked for a third-party country where they can meet and discuss, again, not to be bothered by pesky Americans. And guess what? Seychelles meeting happened in January, a month after this meeting with Kislyak. What happened with that? Like, there are so many things that have never been answered. So even besides Trump, start going down the line. Him, Manafort, the Ukrainians who freaking were, disgusted that this American showed up in the early 2000s and literally was running operations for Russia inside of Ukraine. And it was very well known. And he was running operations in Georgia for Russia. He was running operations in Montenegro for Russia. I mean, this is a Russian agent. I don't know what better word there is. But Manafort knowingly worked against U.S. interest for Russia, including in Montenegro, working to shut down a U.S. base. Why is he walking around, and why, when he was charged in this so-called big special counsel investigation, was for tax evasion, not working for a foreign adversary, an intelligence state, intelligence services to advance their interest against the United States?
I mean, listen, I've got to tell you, friends, I know we're sitting here arguing over Israel and Gaza, and I know we're sitting here arguing over Hassan Piker, who, as far as I'm concerned, needs to be completely erased from the public discourse and shunned by polite society. But people might disagree with me on that, and that's okay. I know we're having all of these debates, but I am telling you right now, the one thing that we should all get behind and demand is Nuremberg-style trials. I mean, there needs to be tribunals for these people. And Jared Kushner had access to the most secret intelligence that you could have, overruled, by the way. The National Intelligence Committee did not think that he should have that. They specifically said that they did not think he should have that for reasons that remain questionable. Trump said, no, he's going to get it. I don't know whether Trump read the President Daily Brief every day, but I can guarantee you Jared read what was interesting to him. Somebody ensured that American assets around the world died or disappeared. Now, you have a United States Senator sitting in prison. We don't have to imagine. You have a Democratic United States Senator, the former chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Menendez, sitting in federal prison for probably at least the next decade because he passed along information that wasn't even top secret. It was, it wasn't like the most top secret to the Egyptians. And a jury ruled in exchange for the Egyptians, funneling money to him and his wife. He was put there by a Democratic. Merrick Garland had no problem prosecuting him for that.
And rightfully so.
And he was found guilty, and he's now sitting in prison. Now, I'm not here to defend Bob Menendez and what he did at all. But if we have Merrick Garland beginning an investigation into this powerful former chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for this, compared to what Trump did or Kushner did or whoever, that kind of investigation, what the fuck was he thinking about not going after these people and relaunching? Listen, for all I know, Donald Trump is pure as the driven snow. Jared Kushner is pure as the driven snow. I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen the evidence. But guess who else hasn't seen the evidence? The feds, because they refuse to pursue it. Right? Like, think about that. Think about that.
And can we get into the feds, by the way, while we're at the feds? Into Patel. and now his role as head of FBI and him potentially traveling to Moscow in a few months.
I mean, as you point out, right before the election, why is the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation traveling to Moscow, which, by the way, we don't even have flights going to Moscow right now. I am banned from going to Moscow, Olga. I think you are too. Right? Meanwhile, the director of the FBI, red carpet rollout. Why is he going there?
And not only is he going there, again, Moskovsky Komsomolets, which is an outlet known for moving information for Russia's security services inside Russia, if they want to get propaganda out, if they want to get information, form a narrative, whatever. They ran a very, very, very detailed interview with a Russian political scientist who obviously was speaking on behalf of what the security services wanted out there, discussing this interview. Discussing Patel's visit to Moscow in an interview that he gave to Reuters about this newfound cooperation with Russia's security services and how now he's working jointly with Russia, he's working jointly with China's security services, that he traveled to China, and now he's going to travel to Russia. So in response to that Reuters interview, Moskovsky Komsomolets put this political scientist out. The first thing out of this long interview is Patel coming for compromise on the Democrats, because we can give them the compromise, but of course Russia's going to want something in return for this compromise that they will hand to Kash Patel to use. And I mean, the interview was so bold and so absurd and so interesting that Russia's security services wanted this information out there, that they were either giving Patel an offer or that they were, or trying to send him a warning about something. They even included, I mean, this is how detailed this interview was. The political scientist said, I am sure that the FBI and the FSB are meeting secretly now in third-party countries, including Turkey or Switzerland, or I forgot the third country. Now, where are the Democrats? Where is Congress? Why is Congress not demanding to know if the FBI is having secret meetings with Russia's security services? Then why in the hell they are secret? Where is anyone? Because that is something surely that Democrats in Congress can get to the bottom of. I mean, and this just shows you how emboldened Russia feels that they could put this out. Now, I'm not saying, that Patel is guilty of anything, but what I am saying is that, one, he is traveling to Russia a few weeks before election. Two, Russians feel so emboldened that they are discussing handing compromise, and Russia's compromise, by the way, is not real compromise. It's usually fabricated and, truths mixed with fabrication. To the FBI director. And 3, so now how do we even have a counterintelligence now if the FBI director is working?
He should be the target of a counterintelligence
Exactly.
I mean, that's the part that's crazy. And Olga, I want to just, we're living in a bizarro world. I mean, could you imagine if we had had this conversation 10, 12 years ago? We would think that we were on drugs. I think about this sometimes because I know you write about it all the time. I write about it all the time. There are times when I'm sitting, literally typing what I'm writing, and I know that you have everything sourced and I have everything sourced. So we don't make assumptions. We just, everything is based in facts that we can source. I sit around sometimes writing this stuff and I think, like, am I in a dream? Like, is this really happening? Like, is this like, sometimes you kind of feel like I must be hallucinating. Did somebody slip me something in a drink? Like, this is crazy. And I want to talk about one more thing before we get to what happened with Japan and Russia recently. But look, I wrote a whole thing on this, Olga. I know you've been writing on this nonstop, but I think it needs to be talked about. The election interference that is happening right now, in conjunction with our biggest social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, TikTok, is insane. But I want to talk about something that happened in Europe a couple years ago, or last year, I should say, and how it translates to what's happening here. So last September, there were severed pig's heads that suddenly appeared outside mosques and a Muslim cultural center in and around Paris, right? With the name Macron written across them. And if you're a typical French person, you're like, oh, okay, there's Emmanuel Macron not being able to control, Islamophobia again, because the French have had these periodic, not so periodic, constant Islamophobic incidents. Then, not so long ago, same year, also last year, there was green paint splattered across French synagogues in Paris and Jewish community centers and Jewish sites, including their Holocaust memorial in the Marais. The Marais, if anybody who knows Paris knows, it's the old historic, it's old and historic period, but it's where the Jewish community historically lived before the war. And the Holocaust memorial is there, and there are tons of synagogues, obviously, in Paris that were affected. Green paint, green is the color associated with Islam. So on the one hand, you have severed pigs' heads, obviously. Muslims, like the Jews, don't eat pork. And then you have green paint associated with Islam splattered all over Jewish sites. And this followed an incident in 2023. A couple of years earlier, where 250 Stars of David were stenciled on walls across Paris in the wake of Hamas's October 7th attack. This was all a Russian op. This is not me making this up. They investigated. They have a good thing of investigating. It was run by Putin's, basically one of the people who's considered to be Putin's potential successor, deputy prime minister in Moscow. And this is the kind of stuff they do at the same time. They did this also in December 2024 in the lead up to the German elections. 276 cars across Germany had their exhaust pipes clogged with construction foam and marked with stickers featuring the Green Party chancellor candidate and the slogan "Be Greener." This was a false flag effort to pin the vandalism on climate activists and damage the Green Party, because remember, they wanted AfD, the far right party, to succeed. So the whole point is not just to do this. The whole point is to have local media write about this. And the Russians were very proud of themselves for this. One email that was sent back to Moscow said, Deutsche Welle is writing about us. Deutsche Welle is a big German newspaper. So, the point is not subtle, right? It's to pit Muslims against Jews and immigrants against the native born, environmentalists against working class motorists and French citizens against Ukrainian refugees and left and right. And I'm just giving you a taste. I mean, they did this with they put Armenian genocide stickers into a Turkish arrondissement in Paris to create those tensions around the Armenian genocide.
They burned the Quran in Sweden.
Yeah, they burned the Quran in Sweden. They had people who pretended to be Ukrainian activists deface a statue of Charles de Gaulle. Like, we can go on, right? But think for a minute about what Olga and I wrote about in the 2016 election and how this is so much more sophisticated, right? Like,
they did the same thing here, by the way. They had pro-gun, anti-gun protests set up at the same time, place, date. They had anti-abortion, pro-abortion protests set up at the same time, place, and whatnot. Right. So they did the same thing here to pin, opposing groups.
And there was a operation in advance of the 2024 election that the Russians called Operation Doppelganger. One of its offshoots was an operation called, and I kid you not, friends, the Good Old USA. That's the name of the operation. And the goal of the Good Old USA was pretty unambiguous. It has a planning document that said that Russia should make every effort to ensure that the viewpoint of a specific American party, which the Justice Department redacted as U.S. political party A, but which is the Republican Party, and the supporters of redacted candidate A, who was clearly Donald Trump, wins over the U.S. public opinion. Its stated goal was to secure a victory for, and I quote, Trump in 2024, because the Republican, quote, the Republican Party is currently advancing a relatively pro-Russian agenda. And what the Good Old USA plan did was a call to create groups on Facebook and Reddit and X that wouldn't initially present themselves as political. They'd write about Michigan football, or they'd write about, make whatever recipes or things to get regular folks engaged. And only then, after a while, they would start putting in political content. And, it's so fascinating how they did this, because it worked. And it worked because then separately, a Kremlin-aligned influence operation tried spreading 135 pieces of deceptive content in the opening months of 2025 as part of this operation. According to researchers who study the campaign, 134 largely went nowhere, but the 135th hit the jackpot with Elon Musk. He starts retweeting it. And he starts retweeting an account called I Meme, Therefore I Am. This account now has over 800,000 followers on Twitter. It's still there. And it posed the question: did you know that USAID spent your tax dollars to fund celebrity trips to Ukraine, all to boost Zelensky's popularity among Americans? False on every level. So false that the celebrities they mentioned, from Ben Stiller to Sean Penn, threatened to sue. That's how false this is. Doesn't matter. Musk retweets it. And it takes off like rocket fire. Now, this account bills itself as, quote, an immigrant mom in New York, unfiltered, no apologies, DM for submissions / credits. Now, look, it could be very well run by an immigrant mom in New York, but it has all the hallmarks of the Kremlin's election interference disinformation campaign that I just talked about. That account was created in April 2022, the same month that Musk agreed to purchase Twitter. And just before the 24 election, it circulated a completely made-up story alleging that Kamala Harris had paralyzed a girl in a 2011 hit and run.
Not only story, it was a fake AI video, deep fake that Russia made, of an interview of this person who claimed that back over a decade ago that she was hit by Harris. And that Harris, it was a hit and run and whatnot. This person didn't exist. Clearly, the video was a fake AI video. And then there were fake websites that were meant to look like, this is where the doppelganger comes in, to look like a San Francisco local outlet that published the same stories, but there's no such thing as that outlet. So it's like ABC, New York 7 News, and then Russia doing ABC, New
Well,
York 7, A News.
well,
And people
yeah.
think they are looking at ABC, New York 7 News instead of, this fake website. That was registered, by the way, in Iceland a few months in 2024 when Russia was ticking up the attack on the election. Go ahead.
And I also want to be clear about something. In this case, with this USAID trip that apparently Angelina Jolie and Sean Penn and Ben Stiller and all these other celebrities took on the taxpayer dime, according to this thing, through USAID, completely false. They all did go to Ukraine. They all did support Zelensky on their own dime. They certainly didn't. USAID did not pay for Angelina Jolie to go to Kiev. Let's be very clear about that. But that had E News, E with the exclamation point, that logo on it. E News was like, we had nothing to do with this. This is what they do. This is what they do. And before we get to the curls, because I know we don't have much time, I just want to say that that's Elon Musk. He is retweeting this shit. And the Russians knew what they were doing because they knew that Elon Musk was coming after USAID. So this gave them the perfect opportunity to roll up their anti-Ukraine stuff into Musk's obsession with USAID. So is he a useful idiot? Is he a Russian asset, Elon Musk? Who knows? Frankly, who cares? Because he's basically doing everything that you would be doing as an asset anyway. The most powerful person on the internet today, one of them, is doing that. The richest man in the world, on paper worth $1 trillion at one point, is acting like a stooge for the Kremlin. Let's not forget that despite saying that he only talked to Vladimir Putin once in his life, he talked to Vladimir Putin, according to the Wall Street Journal, all the time, regularly, and not just to Putin, but also the Wall Street Journal noted, and this is really important, the Wall Street Journal didn't make this connection, but I'm going to for everybody here listening. He spoke to Kurenko, Sergei Kurenko. Kurenko is Putin's first deputy chief of staff, who I talked about. He's the one running all of these operations. He's the one running all the election interference, social media.
The face of it. The face.
Yeah. And so why is Elon Musk talking to Sergei Kurenko? I don't know. Then comes the news today, or at least I wrote about it today. I don't know when it broke, but I broke it today, that Mark Zuckerberg has entered into an arrangement with Newsmax to have Newsmax, not just their current news, but their archive, the same archive for which they had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for false claims about Dominion voting machines through the 2024 election. That is going to be fed into his AI model. So that, and not just Fox, but also, not just them, but Fox, the Daily Caller, which Tucker Carlson started, the Washington Examiner, all of these right-wing publications are now going to be used as what Mark Zuckerberg builds his AI model on. Friends, we will soon not know about reality, because the more people use AI and think that it's accurate, the more lies like this are going to penetrate the public consciousness. And pretty soon, based on Mark Zuckerberg's AI model, you are going to think that January 6th was, and I quote, a day of love, which is what Donald Trump called it, and which is what Newsmax talked about all the time, and not what it really was, which was an insurrection. He's not using a commensurate amount of left-wing sites. He's not putting, whoever, I don't even know who the equivalent is of Fox News. He's not putting MSNBC in there, right? I mean, MSNBC actually is not getting sued for lies because they don't lie. But so, this is what I'm talking about. This is all completely psychotic. And this is going to outlive Donald Trump. And it's going to outlive this Republican Congress. They are building an alternate reality with the Russians, with AI, with the Republican Party. This is the most unholy alliance in the history of the world. This makes the Axis powers look like child's play, because those could be defeated on the military field and then they're gone. This is like, I'm telling you.
Oh, don't worry. And they're coming for the far left too. So
Yeah, they're coming
you're
for
going to
far left
have
too. Yeah,
joint Russian-Iranian
yeah,
operations on the far left, and you're going to have the Republican Party, basically all the moderates that got pushed out of it and
yeah,
turned into MAGA, and that's it. And just two things to mention on
yeah.
that. One, Russia has an operation, because they have an operations for everything, that they were carrying out, I believe, last year or the year before, where they created and saturated the internet with God knows how many. I mean, it was countless amounts of fake sites to specifically feed into AI machines. I wrote about it last month, in order to manipulate the information that the AI delivers to you. So the more something is saturated on the internet, so for instance, that Russia rescued Ukrainian children, if they create 10,000 fake sites that are saturating Google and DuckDuckGo and all the results. And then AI models are picking up off of this information. If you ask what happened to Ukrainian children, it will tell you that Russia rescued them, not that they were kidnapped. So we also have that. And the other thing is that the French and German have elections coming up next month, and I've been keeping a very close eye. Russia's running both actual disinformation operations. The drone airport attack was part of this, in Germany, was part of this operation. And they're right now doing both false flag operations and disinformation and fake AI videos, and you name it. They're doing everything, throwing it at the upcoming French and German elections. So this is continuing. We're going to see the same exact thing here come November. Right now here, they just want a whole mishmash. They want a big mess. So they don't right now particularly support anyone in particular, because they have Trump in office. They just want a complete polarization, division, and to break up the parties completely, like to smash the Democratic Party to the Republican Party has been for the most part, and that's it. So.
And they're succeeding. All right,
Yeah.
very quickly, because Olga's got to go. You got to do something. You have another show coming up, right? Just to
with Ken Harbaugh in 9 minutes. So
okay, so very quickly before we get to excuse me,
bless you.
Thank you. Vladimir Putin has decided to take a little trip, and he's decided to take a little trip to the Kuril Islands. For people who don't know what the Kuril Islands are, they are in the Pacific. They are between Russia and Japan. They are historically Japanese territory. In 1945, when the United States basically already dropped the bomb on the Japanese, Russia suddenly declared war on Japan. They had never declared war on Japan, the Soviet Union, through the entirety of the war. But when they understood the Japanese had lost effectively, but the war was still going on, they decided they were suddenly at war with the Japanese, and Stalin went and seized the Kuril Islands. The Kuril Islands are this little chain of islands in the Pacific that belong now to Russia, but had belonged to Japan for, they're Japanese effectively. Did that to tweak the Japanese. Why, Olga? Why?
So basically, Russia right now is working closely with China, and literally have become a junior partner of China. And this has been something, that we have discussed a million times over, between the joint Chinese-Russian air patrols near Japan, between the joint, trainings that Russia and China are having. And frankly, they're trying to destabilize the region and they are a big threat. I mean, you have, two countries combining together while the U.S. is stuck in a quagmire in Iran, and God knows, I mean, we have a president that we don't even know if he's a Russian agent or not a Russian agent or what's happening. And he clearly acts like one because if anyone could destroy America from within any better, I can't picture what the Russians would have done differently, or the Chinese, or the Iranian, or anyone than what is happening now. But yeah, they are definitely making a message, sending a message. Putin is definitely sending a message to Japan. Japan just released defense report that I wrote about last week, specifically warning about this joint thing between between China, Russia, and North Korea. And this alliance is becoming extremely dangerous. In my article, I added, it's also Iran because all four are working in different theaters together. And that's it. And this is why I have been advocating, I think, as long as you know me, that we need to rethink NATO and have, a normal alliance that includes Japan and South Korea and New Zealand and Australia and Europe. US right now, I wouldn't put in this alliance until we get our shit together. But Canada, so it would be NATO plus building up, because these theaters are all interconnected, and we need to change the approach of how we look at things. And you have experts looking at Europe and Russia. You have experts looking at China. You have, and the Pacifics, you have experts looking at the Middle East. I argue that they're all interconnected because these authoritarian regimes are working together to basically overthrow the US-led world order. And that's it. And today's visit is a perfect example of how interconnected this is, because trust me, Putin did not decide to wake up and go there for no reason. This is a direct message both to the United States, to Asia, that, Russia can partner with China and do something. And I worry, my biggest worry that I lose sleep over is that China launches an invasion into Taiwan, while Russia simultaneously launches attacks against a NATO country, because then you would really have a big split, and then US is basically tripping over their shoelaces. So, in a long story, this is the long answer to a very, very, dangerous situation we're watching. And like you always say, basically we're watching the alignment of World War III. We've been watching it for years now. There's no magical point of a world war. It started with the invasion of Ukraine. It started, frankly, I mean, there are so many pointers along the way. Yeah, exactly. Georgia and then Ukraine. There are so many pointers along the way, but we're watching this very clear alignment. And the most dangerous part is that the US is nowhere to be found right now. They're not siding with the Europeans. They're not going to side for shit sure with South Korea and Japan. And you see Trump basically, throwing, depleting our weapons to throw them at drones, and that's it for whatever reason. We don't know, but it's leaving the US basically, on top of everything, depleted.
Yep. Well, I know you got to go. We can talk about this.
And on that note, just to add one thing that I don't want to, but this is just shows you how dangerous this is. There were joint exercises between Ukrainians and Americans. It was in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. The Ukrainians kicked Americans' ass. Like it went very, very bad for the Americans. This is the third exercise that Ukrainians have had, one with Swedish forces. There was another exercise with NATO forces, and they kicked their ass. So this is a big problem.
Yep. All right. All right, Olga, on that note, it is so good to see you. Have the best show with Ken Harbaugh. For folks who want to stick around and listen to that, do it on Olga's Substack, I'm Asking Russia, or on Ken Harbaugh's Substack. Please go follow them. And good to see everybody. Okay. Thanks, Olga. Bye.
Bye.